Welcome, everyone. Good morning to those who are gathered here in the sanctuary on Rugby Road, and to all who are joining us also online today. As we come together for worship, we begin with a musical prelude from Scott DeVeaux. Welcome to the UU Congregation of Charlottesville. My name is Susan Karlson, and I am delighted you hear that theme, to be leading worship this morning with my colleague in church membership and also in UU ministry, Fritz Hudson. And our music director, of course, Scott DeVeaux. This sanctuary was built over 70 years ago on land that was the homeland of the Monacan people, and that was once cared for by enslaved people from Africa and their descendants. We honor all who dwelt here and all our congregation whose lives led to this moment of our gathering. So now, I invite you to take a moment to greet others who are with us in worship. Those online can unmute and say hello, and those here in the sanctuary or in the social hall are welcome to greet your neighbors, especially those you may not know.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, everybody.
Glad to see everybody.
Hello, hello.
So many people online.
Oops.
No, okay. All right.
Hi, Gail. Hi, Bobby. Hi, Wayne.
Hello. Never sure how long to leave my video and my mute up for these.
It's never the same, is it?
The same.
Lots of good vibes going on out there. Good job, people. Saying hello, that's the way to start the day. We, of course, welcome all of you who might be newcomers among us, and I met several out in the way in, so we invite you to join us after the service in our fellowship hall, our social hall. Please feel free to use one of the red mugs you find out there, and since I'm pretty new here, I'm going to have one too. We can clink glasses and get acquainted that way if you want. Everyone is welcome here in the sanctuary, of course, but if you would like to move into the social hall, we do have live streaming out there of this service, and it's a little roomy. If there's someone with whom you are needs to move around during the service, that's a good option. Many thanks to all the folks who are helping us share worship this morning, both here and online. Our greeters, our ushers, our hospitality and logistics team. Special thanks to our AV tech, Rachel Buckland, without whom nothing happens here this morning. And supporting all the programming we do on dual platforms, both online and here in the Rugby Road Sanctuary. I call them full service ministers, the Reverend Tim and Reverend Leah, are resting as they should during the month of July. And Susan and I are but two of their well-orchestrated lineup of guest worship leaders for the month. And whose leadership will we enjoy next Sunday? Well, see your upcoming email newsletter for that news. Friday's newsletter announced our service in memory of John Lineweaver on August the 2nd. That's a Wednesday, the week after next. It begins at 2 p.m. and we hope that you will join us for that service. And also, as I said, please join for coffee and conversation so the newcomers have somebody to talk to besides me and Susan in the social hall after the service. And here now to welcome us from our Board of Trustees, we welcome Bev Ryan, who's got more experience up here than either one of us does.
Is this on? Yeah. Okay, hold on. So I am the Vice President of the Board, and I'm happy to be here with all of you. Summertime is a little quieter in the sanctuary and with the board, so I don't have much board information to tell you. We will be looking more at the bigger picture and discussing how UU what it can bring to the larger community and the world. We'll also be preparing for a board retreat in September. So I had to fill the time with something. So I just wanted to tell you a story about my escapade yesterday. I don't usually talk about myself, but anyway. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a nurse practitioner. I retired in 2016, so it's been a few years since I've really done any nursing and medical work, but I found out that it comes back to you quickly. Yesterday, I was over in Summit House helping with the yard sale when Dave Shutt came over and said, we have a medical emergency over here in the basement. So I ran over and kind of assess the situation. There was a gentleman who was having really dizzy, like almost fainting spells. He was standing when I walked in, his face was white as a sheet. So I quickly got him to a chair, said, you need to sit down, and his color started coming back. And I kind of went through my assessments, took his pulse. I didn't have a blood pressure cuff. He immediately told me that, he thought maybe it was his blood pressure. And so we kind of went from there. He needed to go to the emergency room, but it took him a little while to accept that fact. At one point, he looked like he was really going to pass out, so I had to go in and get the use guys to come and help me lay him on the floor so he didn't fall and crack his head. The rescue squad came, and there was an EMT and a medic and 3 firemen and a woman that I don't know what her role was, but there were a lot of people that showed up. I was like amazed. So anyway, they were able to gather him together. But while we were waiting for the ambulance was like the best, I can't say it's the best time, but so he was lying on the floor and I didn't have a pillow right away. So I put his head in my lap and just talked to him. And we talked about a lot of things. And I learned a lot about him in just that little bit of time. And I think I made a friend. And I made a friend with his wife too. And we each have each other's phone numbers now. So anyway, that was my story. And I just want to say this church, this congregation is my family. And I just love it so much.
And you know what you were talking about, Bev, is exactly what Fritz and I will be talking about this morning. How we are with one another, how we serve one another, how we care for one another. And this is our call to worship. This morning unfolds for each of us in a different way. And yet, here we are together in this community. We each experience this morning as a projection of what our day and night dreams shared with us. And so we venture into this day, this moment, this iridescent instant, not knowing what the day holds for us, to choose what paths we wander, what discoveries catch hold of us, and what purpose calls us into fully being just and compassionate beings. To answer that higher calling, come, let us worship together.
So now I'd like to invite Nancy Hurlbrink to come forward and light our chalice. And as she's doing that, I think Rachel will have our words that we will join together in saying. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together. And now with our hand motions, we light this chalice to celebrate Unitarian Universalism. This is the church of open minds. This is a church of helping hands. This is a church of loving hearts. I invite us now, please, to rise as we are able and join in the hymn Spirit of Life. It's number 123 in the gray hymnal, but it will be here on the screen, and we'll sing it through twice, but watch for the change of word in the second verse.
Spirit of life, come unto me, say in my heart all the stirrings of compassion, blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice, roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me. Spirit
Spirit of life, Spirit of love, come unto us all. Our spirit this morning comes first in a story told first by Rabbi Marc Gellman. It's primarily in two voices, a narrator, which will be my voice, and the voice of God, whom I will introduce in just a moment. The story, however, requires two additional supporting voices, and I'm going to ask you all to provide those voices. The first voice is that of angels, and I'm going to ask all of you seated here, of course, in front of the pulpit, as to be those angels. And the second voice is that of a man and a woman, which enters the story a bit later. And I'm going to ask all of you seated in front of the piano there to be our man and our woman. Now, in the story, you angels will know when you're about to speak when I say, the angels asked, or the angels said. And you men and women will know when you're about to speak when I say the man and the woman said, and the man and the woman asked. And the words that each group will say after I prompt you will magically is called Rachel in this church, magically come up on the screen here, and I'll conduct you kind of like Scott does in the choir. So you know when to start, and then you speak them out, just read them out in unison. Okay, angels, is that all right? Okay, men and women? All right, we're ready to roll here. So our story begins. Long ago, before there was anything, there was God. And there were some angels back then. And there was a huge swirling glob of rocks and water with no place to go. So the angels asked God, why don't you clean up? Excellent, thank you. So God collected the rocks from the huge swirling glob and put them together in clumps. And then God spoke, and God said,
some of these clumps of rocks will be planets. Some of them will be stars. And some of these rocks are just rocks.
So then God collected water from the huge swirling glob and put it together in pools. That's a pool.
It doubles as a blanket, though.
And God said,
some of these pools of water will be oceans. Some will become clouds. And some of this water will just be water.
And then the angels said, well, God.
No.
Well, then on some of the rocks, God placed growing things. And on some of the rocks, God placed creeping things. And on some of the rocks, God placed things that only God knows what they are. And when he'd done all of that, the angels asked,
no.
So, God made a man and a woman from some of that water and some of that dust. And God said to them,
I'm really tired now. Please finish up this world for me. Really, it's almost done.
And the man and the woman said, "We can't finish the world alone. You have the plans, and we are too little." And let's see, God said,
"You're big enough. You're big enough." But I agree to this. If you keep trying to finish this world, I will be your partner.
and the man and the woman asked,
Well, you see, a partner is someone that you work with on a really big thing that neither of you could do alone. If you have a partner, it means that you can never give up because your partner is depending on you. On the days that you think that I'm not doing enough, and on the days I think you're not doing enough, even on those days, we are still partners, and we must not stop trying to finish the world. That's the deal.
and they all agreed on that deal. Excellent. So then, the angels asked God,
I don't know. Go ask my partners.
thank you for your wonderful good work in that little story. So, we gather today as partners and as a community, and we do that because we care for one another. We embody this care in part by speaking and hearing the joys and the sorrows that we each come holding in our hearts. We hope, of course, to learn more of your joys and sorrows in the chat entries, those of you on Zoom, that you write in there. Or you may later leave a note to us on the credenza over there. And we always know that our deepest joys and our deepest sorrows may never find words to share. And yet our silence too can be shared in full appreciation of their presence within it.
Another way that we show our care for one another is in sharing our financial gifts with our community and our congregation. Our social action collection for the month of July is the Buck Squad, whose mission is to reduce gun violence in Charlottesville, keeping our community safe. And of course, this week we've had so much gun violence in the world. Buck Squad is the only prevention de-escalation program of its kind in the city, addressing conflict through violence interruption. Rachel, will you please show us the social action slide for giving for those who would like to make a donation right now? In addition to giving online, if you'd like to give today with cash or check, please use the social action collection envelopes here in the sanctuary and place your offering in the collection plate, which will be over here on the side. And no need to seal those envelopes. Please, we reuse them, use them over and over again. In addition to our social action collection, each week we invite everyone into the spiritual practice of generosity by giving to the ministry of our congregation. It's through our pledges and with the weekly Sunday morning offering, together, our financial gifts and support build the future of our congregation. This is one of the ways that we practice shared ministry together. So there is that one. During the music that follows, you may choose to make your Sunday morning offering by using the text address or going to our website. And here in the sanctuary, you're invited to share not only your financial gifts, but also share the joys and sorrows in your hearts. Those online may put them in the chat box, and those of you in the sanctuary may come forward to place a stone in the water. You may also leave us a note on the joy and sorrow paper provided on the credenza near the sanctuary doors. Let us dedicate all of the many gifts we share with one another by saying together, "We accept your gifts with gratitude. May we use them wisely for the highest good." Thank you, Scott. That's such beautiful meditative music. We so often think that our only partners in life are those that we actually live with or are in intimate relationships with, perhaps business partners, but there's so many varieties of partnerships. In our story for all ages, God partners with a man and a woman because working on the world is just too much to do alone. Humans have been in partnership from the beginning of life. It's our nature. Cultivating partnerships is crucial in our everyday lives. I remember a story once when I was a clinical social worker here in Charlottesville prior to entering the ministry. I worked with a colleague then to create a support group out in the community. And our supervisor had us partner with an art therapist, a music therapist, and a movement therapist. So many types of therapists. But we learned so much from that. Together, we began to understand more about one another. And in the process, we learned how to co-create an environment where support and healing could take place. It was both a personal challenge as well as a delight. In talking about this service, Fritz and I learned to partner with one another. We heard each other's preferences and strong feelings about each element, and we chose together, particularly, we looked for hours for just the right story, or what we thought was the right story, until we agreed on partners. The congregation here has often been a crucible for developing partnerships, a nurturing place for many of its members who unveil their gifts for either professional ordained ministry or for service to the greater good. My earliest leadership roles in this congregation 20-some odd years ago led me to become a Unitarian Universalist minister. This congregation fostered my learning about pastoral care, which augmented my social work training as a therapist and a community organizer. I became the convener of what was then called Pastoral Associates. I also served as a convener of Worship Associates, which what you now call Worship Weavers. I learned about social action and justice in this congregation in a religious context as co-chair of the Social Action Committee. And then I realized our connections to the wider world through the Unitarian Universalist Association's anti-racism initiative, which was a national initiative, as well as the district anti-racism transformational team. At that time, our former minister, Reverend Wayne Arneson, and I partnered on a skit at the anti-racism conference held right here in these pews. And it was from this pulpit that I preached my very first sermon. And I remember it being titled Unwrapping Our Gifts. And it was about how both ordained ministers and lay leaders work together, either in the pews or on the Zoom views, to share in the ministry of the whole congregation. Good ministers, like our very own Reverends Tim and Leah, they seek ways to share, to develop that kind of ministry in others, not just in themselves. And this church has always sponsored a number of its members, now ordained, like me and Pam Phillips, and Adam Slate, now on the path to Unitarian Universalist ministry. Yes. I'm so grateful to this congregation and to its leadership who helped me to realize and develop my own ministerial calling. As Fritz and I talked about our various callings within congregations and in the community at large, we both thought of one of the forebears of Unitarianism, James Luther Adams. Adams spoke of Martin Luther's Protestant Reformation concept of the priesthood of all believers, but he added on the prophethood of all believers. Adams believed that both were necessary for religious communities and community organizations that wished to transform injustice and the world, what Judaism calls tikkun olam. And I think we do that by becoming better and better partners with one another. In our liberal faith, the priestly role offers blessing as folks go through various rites of passage like birth, coming of age, marriage, and death. A congregation partners with its ministers who have the gifts, the training, and a shared vision to accompany people and lead through these passages. The prophetic role is one that has always claimed my heart. Often members side with love, like the stole that I have here. It's our public witness advocacy program as part of the Unitarian Universalist Association. Side with love is about bringing more justice and greater compassion. Ministers and lay members act in numerous ways with interfaith partners or with other social justice organizations. It's a part of that swirling glob that we had here. In that work, we are partners in solidarity, and we're accountable to those on the front lines of injustice and oppression. And we may decide on justice priorities and enact them as we do with inner impact, or meet the moment as in the August 12th, 2017 counter-protests that stood up to hate, anti-Semitism, and white supremacy. Like many people, I answered the call from this congregation, called me back, and I drove from Savannah, Georgia, where I was serving, to join other Unitarian Universalist clergy and UCC members in action in our partnership together. And now Fritz has his own reflections on the priestly role, on priest in the pews and on the views.
So, first, how should I address you? Ladies and gentlemen over here? Well, we know that's not near inclusive enough, don't we? How about non-binary siblings over here? I don't know a lot about angels, but I definitely want to give you the full respect of whatever may be your gendered identity. What I want to ask you all, though, is in all of your humanity and all of your divinity, to consider Reverend Susan here as our Exhibit A. I'll call her our multiplied minister. I happen to know Susan's place among us on most Sundays now. It's about 3/4 of the way back, just behind you, John. I think it's the next one back. But I asked her, so when was it when you were here as a member? And he said, oh no, I was never on that side. She was over on this side, and maybe right over there next to Donna or something about there, she said. And I said, wow, that's putting some people back there on a pretty hot seat, doesn't it? To know that out of that came this. She's our multiplied minister, to be sure. As a matter of fact, my first seat among us when I began worshiping here 3 years ago was among all of you in Zoom land, for it was in my home desk chair. But I had moved that chair there from my minister's office at the Unitarian Church in Lincoln, Nebraska. I had been minister emeritus there since retiring from its full service 9 years ago. So those of you in Zoom land, you're not in any safer seats. It's hot there as well. And if Susan's model for coming into our partnered ministry somehow doesn't feel like yours, I now offer myself as Exhibit B. I'm going to call myself our mugwump minister. Mugwump. That's an old term, I know that. It kind of means fence sitter, right? Someone politically trying to take both sides of a defensive issue. Their mug on one side and their wump on the other side of that fence. Susan is no mugwump on minister, I have to tell you. You just heard how from her early days here in church membership into and through her years of full service as a titled minister in other congregations, and now among us as an ordained member, she's been continuously growing in that ministry. She's been adding new layers, new dimensions, new arenas in her impassioned service of our values, of our people, and indeed of our entire world. And when she asks you to become her partner, you can't try saying, oh, we're too little. She's multiplied herself in the ministry from right where you're sitting. But if you say, but look how big she is, I guess I'm here to say, look how big I'm not. I need you as a partner in ministry, if only in my particular way. I say I am a mugwump on ministry, and I always have been, really. In my childhood family, faith was a very private matter, and church was a world apart. In fact, it was in the next town over, and it felt very separate from where we carried on our real life. My path to engagement with that real life, I thought, would go through some training in the law and perhaps into a position in government. But there were others in my life who saw possibilities that I couldn't. They asked me, well, gee, what do you think about an all-expense trial year in seminary? How about looking into the church's real relationship to community? For free, I said. Well, I guess I've got a year for that. And so I climbed that fence just to take a peek. And once I was on, I began to see down below me how the anchoring posts that held it up actually framed below the surface a kind of hidden bridge into community at its deepest level. Here's how I have crossed that bridge in the years since. That 1-year trial in seminary lured me to self-fund the remaining 2 years of ministry training, but only after I had taken 2 years away in secular service in the Peace Corps in North Africa. For a first church, I sought a very unique situation. I wanted a half-time calling in a member-led congregation that was just taking on its first professional minister. I wanted to work with people to expand their ministry, not do it for them. And I wanted freedom to find service among people who I knew would never enter our doors. And I found that in Wilmington, North Carolina, as minister of its UU fellowship, as it was called, and as a community organizer, a neighborhood organizer, employed by the city of Wilmington. And is it any wonder that that very same congregation lured Susan into full-time ministry 25 years after I left it? And then I went back to pick up that path that I first imagined for myself, moving up to Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I got that lawyer training, but I also took my first shot at being an ordained church member in the local Unitarian congregation. I sang in that choir, and I taught in that Sunday school. And then for 35 years, you could say, I kind of took on a disguise. To most eyes, I appeared to be a full-service church minister in 6 communities across the country. But at the same time, I was admitted to the bar in 3 states, and I served as a farm credit mediator in one, and as an immigration attorney in another. And then 6 years ago, I removed that costume, you might say this costume, and I became a full staff attorney in the juvenile court in Lincoln. And then with love and with family brought me here, my service became special advocacy and mediation in our domestic relations court and a restorative justice facilitator through our Commonwealth Attorney's offices. So I'm here to offer you my model for ministry, quite next to Susan's. You can engage as a partner with us, and no one needs to know it. You can wear your disguise as a lawyer, as a nurse, as a plumber, as a restaurateur, and in that very work, only you will know that what drives you, what guides you, what really rewards you in that, quote, secular work is that it's grounded in your service to the values of membership in our faith. That's my ministry now. My mug is more often in court than this is my first time and maybe my last in the pulpit. But my wump, some Sundays is in the choir, some Sundays is over in Summit House with our youth, but most Sundays, right next to you in a pew.
The Unitarian Universalist Ministers Association Code of Ethics outlines how colleagues are to be in right partnership with one another and all the congregations they serve. And Reverends Tim and Leah often send to me kind of requests from people who are non-members who wish to be married and officiant to be a Unitarian Universalist minister for their weddings or for memorial services. And so they've sent me quite a few people, and I've enjoyed that process of getting to know them. I feel that this is a way I can serve the larger community as a Unitarian Universalist minister, affirmed by this congregation's ministers in that kind of a priestly role. And yet, on the other hand, as a member, as a volunteer in the pews with you, I played a part in adult and youth faith development and participate in Impact and with the Charlottesville Clergy Collective in the prophet kind of role, social justice work. The differences between me or Fritz and Reverends Tim and Leah, we're all clear about the boundaries, and we have many dialogues about how we work together, how we partner together. So that kind of partnership extends to them and to us. But the question is, how do you discern what kind of partnership you wish to engage in whatever facet of your life? Because it extends well beyond this congregation into your whole lives. How do you decide in what kind of capacity you want to serve the world and heal it? which is so much needed for us. You may be, or you may have been, enacting different kind of roles in your life: a teacher, a computer expert, a carpenter, a plumber, a caregiver, all kinds of things. These roles may or may not be ones that you want to bring to the church or to the community that you're a part of. But either way, the roles you play usually will bring some spiritual growth for you, and for that particular place that you're serving. They may bring you a sense of delight as the theme for this month. Delight that washed over me recently as I talked to this wedding couple, and they told me, this is what I love so much, getting to know people, getting to know what's at their heart and their soul, telling me about their past life, how they met, what reinforced their love for one another, why they chose each other out of all the people in the world, their religious past or lack of. And so I have a simple wish, a prayer really for each of you. And it's that you realize the pathways that call you to partner. And may those paths serve as a larger part of the purpose of your life and demonstrate over and over again how connected we all are in this web of life and love. May it be so.
Martin Luther did proclaim the priesthood of all believers, but he didn't do so that we would all become leaders of holy rites. Rather, he ordained us each to direct communion with God. In translating the Greek scriptures into vernacular German, Luther empowered his people to read and believe what the Apostle Peter wrote to the Gentile Christians in Asia Minor those many years ago. You are royal priests, and you can show others the goodness of God. In the seedbed of our faith, Ralph Waldo Emerson reclaimed Luther's good news for us. In his Divinity School address in 1838, Emerson charged all ministers then, dare to love God without mediator or veil, acquaint all at first hand with deity. So men or women or non-binary here among us, we all shook hands with God herself just a moment ago. And angels, you were divinely invited to cross this aisle to engage God's partners over here with your questions about how our world is progressing. All that remains to do is what we do every morning at this point in the service. All that remains to do is for us to rise as we are able, to rise and to cross whatever aisles, to overstep whatever fences lie between us, to ask and to answer with one another whatever questions engage or divide us, and then to join hands together. We are working on a very big thing here, and none of us, not even any half of us, can do it without all the rest of us. And because we are partners, we can never give up. It is the only way we can ensure that our world is never finished. So I invite us to rise as we are able and join in our hymn, Wake Now My Senses, in the gray hymnal. It's number 298. We'll sing just verses 1, 3, and 5, and they'll be projected up here.
Wake now, my senses, and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of meaning and all. Keep with the web of creation your vow. Giving, receiving, as love shows us how. Wake now, compassionate feet to the cry. Voices of suffering fill the void sky. Take up our neighbor, both stranger and friend, giving and striving their hardship to end. Wake now, my vision of ministry clear. Brighten my pathway with radiance here. Mingle my calling with all who will share. Bring forth the planet transformed by our care.
Our benediction is from A. Powell Davies, minister of All Souls Unitarian Church of Washington, D.C. in the mid-20th century.
What are we, any of us, but strangers and sojourners forlornly wandering through the nighttime?
Until we draw together and find the meaning of our lives in one another.
Dissolving our fears in each other's courage.
And
And
lighting
lighting
torches
torches
to guide
guide
us through the
the
dark.
Please extinguish our chalices. And go in peace.